Welcome back to another live stream from Joshua's Magic. We're going to be discussing some esoteric quotes on the topic of teaching today, followed by the saying of the great invocation at the end. So stick around for that. You can find these quotes on my Instagram and Minds page, both at Joshua's Magic, and you can find the link in the description below. But we will move on to the first quote. And if you have any questions or comments, just let me know in the chat and I'll try to get to them. He says, I would like first of all to make one point clear. The great hindrance to the work of the majority of the esoteric schools at this time is their sense of separateness and their intolerance to other schools and methods. The leaders of these schools need to absorb the following fact. All schools which recognize the influence of the Trans-Himalayan Lodge and whose workers are linked consciously or unconsciously with such masters of wisdom as Master Morya or Master KH, form one school and are a part of one discipline. There is therefore no essential conflict of interest, and on the inner side, if they are in any way functioning effectively, the various schools and presentations are regarded as a unity. There is no basic difference in teaching, even if their terminology used may vary, and the technique of work is fundamentally identical. If the work of the great ones is to go forward as desired, in these days of stress and world need, it is imperative that these various groups should begin to recognize their real unity in goal, guidance, and technique, and that their leaders should realize that it is fear of other leaders and the desire that their group should be numerically the most important, which prompts the frequent use of the words, this is a different discipline, or their work is not the same as ours. It is this attitude which is hindering the true spiritual growth and spiritual life and understanding among many students gathered into the many outer organizations. At this time, the great heresy of separateness taints them. The leaders and members talk in terms of our and yours, and this discipline and that, and of this message being right, usually their own, and the other message which may be right, but is probably doubtful, if not positively wrong. Each regards their own group as specifically pledged to them, to their mode of instruction, and threatens their members with dire results if they cooperate with membership of the other groups. Instead, they should recognize that all students in analogous schools and working under the same spiritual impulses are members of one school and are linked together in a basic subjective unity. The time must come when these various and at present separative esoteric bodies will have to proclaim their identity, when the leaders and workers of the secretaries will meet with each other and learn to know and understand each other. Someday this recognition and understanding will bring them to the point where they will endeavor to supplement each other's efforts, exchange ideas with each other, and so, in truth and in deed, constitute one great college of esotericism in the world, with varying classes and grades, but all occupied with the work of training aspirants, preparing them for discipleship, or superintending the work of disciples as they prepare themselves to take initiation. Then will cease the present attempts to hinder each other's work by comparison of methods and techniques, by criticism and defamation, by warning and the cult of fear, and the insistence on exclusiveness. It is these attitudes and methods which at this time are hindering the entrance of the pure light of truth. One second, I just got to close the window here. Bit of noise coming through there. Hopefully that's taking care of it enough. But yeah, this was written last century, but I think it could probably apply today, where teachers of various spiritual and esoteric groups don't recognize the value of the other groups, or that a different or even slightly different method might be useful to a certain group of people. But that's their way further up the ladder of spiritual development instead of an errant way that's taking them backwards. And the key is to have a kind of real understanding of principles and even an intuitive sense of what's going on. Because if you understand on that level, you can see the unity, um, or at least the where things start coming together. But if you don't, then it's, well, just the outer differences. Well, their technique of meditation is this, and they're wrong, and we're right. Instead of they're both leading students towards unfolding their mental and spiritual faculties, even if the approach initially is different. So it would be good if people focused on the commonalities. Um, that doesn't mean you should participate in every meditation from every group necessarily. But if you can focus on and really understand what's the synthesis behind it, or what's the unifying principle behind it, then you can work intelligently with these other groups. But unfortunately, in all this time, I still don't think there's any um, sort of council where all these esoteric schools meet up with each other and kind of have that level of interplay he was hoping for. So I think it's still further afield. Moving on to the next quote. And by the way, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like on it and consider sharing it with somebody who might also appreciate it. It says, I wonder if you have noticed, and when I say you, I refer to all the disciples in this ashramic group. This is from Discipleship in the New Age, so he's talking to his group of disciples and aspirants who were following him for that. That nearly all of you are on the second ray egoically. Again, that's the ray of love, wisdom. The reason for this choice of second ray souls is the work in this group is for work in this group, to work in this group, is because the ray is preeminently the teaching ray, the ray that is sometimes called that of light-giving influence, or the ray of the illuminator. The task of all true educators is to bring light to the minds of those they instruct, so that they walk more securely in the way which leads to the goal of any particular incarnation. It was therefore obvious that the major influence dominating the group would be that of the second ray. The interesting thing to note, however, is that in practically all cases, it is the soul ray which has this predominating influence. There are no second ray personalities in this group. This requires, consequently, much definitely applied activity on the part of you all in order to cause its manifested expression. The next thing to note is that the personality rays are, with one exception, on the line of 1, 3, 5, and 7, showing thereby a tendency to preserve balance and to offset the powerful controlling line of 2, 4, and 6. I want this word balance to be much in your minds as you study the work of the ashram and the group interrelation. Only the balanced person can truly meet the need of those entrusted to him to teach or handle with wisdom the two lines of synthesizing force which are brought into conjunction in every teaching process. These lines are the 5 lines of energy which compose the teacher's equipment and those which compose the equipment of the one who is to be taught. So the rays, the odd number rays and the even number rays. The odd number rays are sort of the masculine rays you can consider, and the even number rays are the feminine rays. And he's talking about there that it's wise to have a balance here, that he's chosen people who are on the soul ray of the second ray. And I think part of that is because it would be easy to express that quality in a personality sense with people on that personality ray. But here he's aiming at something higher, and bringing that through requires some real effort. Because these people aren't, all third degree initiates or something. They're not perfectly channeling the light of the soul or something like that. But he also makes the point that he's chosen people on the um, kind of opposite pole of the 2, 4, 6 line, the feminine line that includes the second ray, of 1, 3, 5, and 7, the masculine line, so that there's this balance between the two, that it's not just skewed totally in one direction. And actually, continuing on with that quote, I posted the next paragraph the next day. So this in the book follows what he just said there. In no profession is the attitude of the observer more required than in the teaching profession. And in no profession is the correct handling of one's personal force of greater importance. This realization will produce automatically two techniques which later we can study in greater detail. The technique of controlling one's own force so that there can be no undue or dangerous pressure, and the technique of employing pressure correctly so as to evoke response in the one being taught. This constitutes a definite science, and we shall deal with it as we proceed in our study. So when you're teaching, to be an effective teacher, you need to focus on the person who's learning, not on what you want or what you think, but how you can best present the knowledge or the ideas to the student or students. And that's sort of analogous to handling your own force, because there's energy in their force in you presenting ideas. And how do people learn best? Do they learn best by saying, it's this way, memorize all these facts, and this is how it is, and repeat it back to me? Or they usually assimilate the knowledge better by being engaged, by you drawing out of them their inherent capacities and virtues, and making the subject matter their own. I'd say certainly the second part. And so that's really important because you want people to actually understand what you're teaching and not just memorize a bunch of facts. I mean, memorizing facts can be important, but that's not really the highest or best virtue of a teacher. So we will move on to the quote from the next day. And this one is pretty interesting. This is from a larger letter, again, in Discipleship in the New Age to a specific disciple. It's worth reading. It's an interesting read to see what happens with this particular individual and what advice the Tibetan had given him. But in this part of it says, most certainly you have not failed. You are at the climax or peak of the testing period. The only point to be determined is, can you overcome in this life and free yourself from the astral or emotional control, or will the test be prolonged until the next life? So he was telling this guy that the second initiation was sort of before him, and that he needed to prepare for it, or that these tests were just coming to him and he had to overcome this sort of emotional stuff. So that's the context of this. These are the questions which only you can answer. In order to answer them, you should enter into a cycle of intense quiet and, if possible, of peaceful normality. Can you free yourself for 2 years, my brother, and at the end stand free? You would be well advised to do this. You should relinquish your groups and stand alone. At present, you are not working along New Age lines, for your work is along the old lines of superior teachers gathering their groups around them, of mystery, where there is no mystery, because there is no mystery in esoteric teaching. And this is a lesson which you solely need to learn, and of criticism, openly critical of the student, which is sadly lacking in love. No New Age teacher gathers a group around himself, exacting their loyalty and obedience, nor does he shut the door to other aspects of truth as you have done. He offers the teaching and regards himself only as a student. So again, this sort of goes back to that first quote of this sort of old Piscean way of teaching people, that I'm the teacher and I know, and those other things out there aren't for you, and follow me, that kind of stuff. But the New Age teacher, which is probably pretty lacking today, though not absent, you're presenting the teachings, and it's not on you being so important or you having more knowledge. Or that's not your attitude or your focus, but it's on presenting them, and it's up to the students to sort of accept them or not. And you recognize also that you're learning at the same time. I mean, I come on here, I don't know everything about the Bailey teachings, and I'm presenting it to you, and hopefully it resonates with you, but maybe it doesn't. Uh, so that's that quote, and we will move on to the next one. This one's a bit longer, so I posted it on Minds. Through the pressure of education, second-ray energy, through the growth of the concept of synthesis, first-ray energy, and through the correct use of energy, fifth-ray energy, this world can be brought into a condition of preparedness for the externalization of the spiritual hierarchy. The efforts of the disciples coming from the ashram of KH, that's Kudhume, by the way, he's a second-ray master, will be largely directed towards the general public, but they will work primarily through educators in all countries and through those concerned with the teaching of religion. Educators touch those preparing for all types of activity. The task will necessarily be slow, particularly at first, but the second ray endowment of these disciples, as that of all disciples on this ray, is a steady perseverance which brooks no discouragement, even when discouragement makes its appearance. Such disciples refuse to discontinue their effort or to change their spiritually ordained plans, even when the obstacles to accomplishing them seem insuperable. Disciples will come deliberately into incarnation and will take office in institutions of higher learning and in churches, and will exert such pressure that old obsolete methods, ancient outworn theologies, and selfish and competitive techniques will be ended, and the sciences of cooperation, of right human relations, and of correct adjustment to life through meditation and right vision will supervene the present methods of learning. This will lead to no damage to the acquisition of academic knowledge or the right apprehension of spiritual truth. The vision will be different and the goals of a higher order, but the best that is now taught along the lines of art, religion, and science will still be available. They will, however, be presented with a greater enlightenment and a better emphasis. They will meet the people's need. The churches, being today headed towards failure and lacking vision, will eventually inevitably crash upon the rocks of unwarranted and abused authority. And out of the wreckage will emerge those true and spiritually enlightened churchmen who, with vision and sure knowledge, free from dogmatism and hating ecclesiastical authority, will develop the new world religion. So this is pretty interesting. The preamble to this is he's talking about these different rays and ashrams. So that's part of it. But he's talking about disciples coming into incarnation and instituting kind of new ways of teaching in different organizations, whether it be religious organizations or just other teaching organizations. And that this kind of focus on outward things and sort of selfishness and authority will be pushed out, and new techniques will come, and that preserves all the kind of knowledge, right? Like, so you're not going to stop teaching kids about math, right? For instance, but finding a way that puts a focus on the good of the whole instead of individual desires, whether recognized or not. And the other thing to point out is, like, just because somebody's doing something new doesn't mean it's good, right? So new isn't always good. Sometimes it's just uh, negative motivations that are kind of dressed up in other things. Like, I remember a few years ago, there was this Common Core stuff, and some of the math was really seemingly kind of backward, for instance. So just because something's new doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It might even have a good impulse, but it might be so misapplied that it's ultimately not useful in its current form. So don't take this stuff to mean that whatever is new comes along is definitely, operating correctly from the spiritual impulse. It might even be operating from the impulse, but it might be wildly misapplying it. So you got to have applied discernment, judgment, and discrimination, and all these things. But again, this new world religion, which he's talked about before, I think it has a lot to do with understanding the principles that that govern things, whereas now religion is usually dogmatically adherent to, well, this text says this, and so this is how things are. But there's no spiritual or intuitive or occult understanding of what's the principles or the reality going on behind that. It's sort of like the blind leading the blind. Like I memorized this religious book or text, and so now I'm an expert, but you don't have any real knowledge of the things contained therein. But yeah, the New World religion won't be doing away with all the old text or whatever, but there'll be an understanding that to some degree supersedes them, and that intuitive understanding and the recognition of the principles involved will bring people together, and of experience, different spiritual experience that people will have an understanding of instead of just I've read stuff. But I'd be interesting what thoughts you have on these quotes and if they resonated with you or if they didn't. But we'll move into saying the great invocation now. Okay. Take a minute to let go of whatever might be weighing you down mentally, emotionally. Align with the soul. And from that case, we'll say forth the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. The light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om. Thank you everybody for coming and watching till the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to leave a like, and share it, and subscribe, and consider checking out sorry, Instagram and Minds. Leave a like on some of those if you're inclined. I appreciate it. Till next time, it's Joshua's Magic. Wishing you all a wonderful week. Till next time, be well.